Two themes for reflection, adumbrated already here and there in these pages, can provide an open conclusion. I have striven to unravel certain problems propounded in terms of history and psychology, but the entirely objective observations to which I have been led are not self-sufficient. They call for certain decisions. They introduce a fresh uncertainty which is not altogether as simplified as the passion-fidelity dilemma may suggest. Actually, no problem is ever understood till we have foreseen how to solve it and pass beyond it. And it is no good trying to pass beyond the passion-fidelity dilemma by simply denying one of its horns. I have already said, and I must insist again, that to doom passion in theory can only be to try to suppress one pole of our creative tension. Actually, such a thing is not feasible. The Philistine who is ready to condemn all passion a priori confesses thereby never to have experienced passion of any kind. He is not one who has passed beyond the point of conflict, but one who has not yet reached it. The only advance it can be hoped that he might make would be achieved through the breakdown of his confidence, that is, through his being engulfed in some dramatically passionate experience. Must we go still further than Kierkegaard went beyond the ethical stage? I sometimes feel, indeed I sometimes realize, that from the standpoint of the Christian faith there is doubtless nothing to be gained by a regulation of morals for non-Christians. On the contrary, that would be a way of protecting them from the authentic human despair which might bring them to believe. The cure of a soul, not in the sense of middle-class moral hygienics, but in the Christian sense that makes the desired end but a Christian sense that makes the desired end that an unbeliever should come to believe ought to make us wish that non-Christians might go right through to the far side of the happiness of passion. But all efforts are directed to keeping them on this side of it, so that the only concrete far side that they are able to wish for or imagine is the disorder of the passions. But it needs to be added that a man abandoned to his disorderliness experiences a despair for which the remedy may well seem to him to be what St. Paul calls the law, and it is only by renunciation of the law as thus understood that we can be led to faith. But beyond a passion that has been experienced all the way to its fatal dead end, what can we henceforth have an inkling of? The two themes for reflection I am about to sketch indicate two ways of going beyond, consistent with this book but outside the schematic limits of all exposition. The first theme is given its bearings by reference to a personal drama, the biographical details of which are common property. The event which proved for Kierkegaard to be the starting point of all his reflection was his breaking off of his engagement to Rougemont. The private causes of the break are still partially mysterious. It was an unshareable and unmutterable secret that in Kierkegaard's view obstructed his entering into marriage, because this marriage was to have been happy according to the world. The indispensable obstruction to the advance of passion was on this occasion so thoroughly subjective, peculiar, and unamenable to comparison that its gravity will not be suspected unless with the help of a reference to Kierkegaard's faith. According to him, the relations which man, finite and sinful, can have with his God, who is eternal and holy, are exclusively those of a love fatally unhappy. Quote, God creates everything ex nihilo, end of quote, he says. And whomsoever God elects by his love, quote, he begins by reducing to nothing, end of quote. From the standpoint of the world and of natural life, God thus appears as my mortal enemy. Here we are being brought up against the extreme limit, the pure springs of passion, and in the same moment we are thrust into the heart of the Christian faith. For behold, the man now dead to the world, killed by infinite love, has to go forward and to live in the world as if he had no more urgent and higher task. Quote, the knight of faith, end of quote, when met with in the street, has nothing superhuman about him. Quote, he looks like a tax collector, end of quote, and behaves like any decent middle-class citizen. And yet, quote, he has renounced all things with an infinite resignation, and if he has recovered all things in the sequel, it is by virtue of the absurd, that is by virtue of faith. He is constantly leaping into the infinite, but faultlessly and with complete confidence, so that he drops back into the finite, and nothing is noticeable about him but the finite. That's from Soren Kierkegaard, Fricht og beven, fear and trembling. Thus, the extremity of passion, death and love introduces a new life, where passion never ceases to be present, but is under the most jealous incognito. For it is now far more than regal, it is divine. On the analogy of faith, it may thereupon be understood how passion, whatever the plane in which it is manifested, attains its true future state in salvation thanks only to that act of obedience, which is a life steadfast and true. To live, quote, like everybody else, end of quote, and yet by virtue of the absurd becomes an offensive piece of deceit in the eyes of anyone who does not believe in the absurd. But it is far more than a synthesis and something infinitely more and other than a solution for anyone who does believe that God keeps faith and that love never deceives the beloved. No doubt Kierkegaard did not succeed in recovering the finite world except in his awareness of its loss, a loss that was tremendously fruitful for his genius. He never recovered Regine, but he never stopped loving her or dedicating his books to her. And perhaps it is in the life work put into those books that he was most truly faithful. We need not seek anywhere but in his unquestionably unique vocation for being a solitary and explanate. We need not seek anywhere but in his unquestionably unique vocation for being a solitary, the explanation of his failure as a man. Others are endowed with some other vocation. They marry Regine, and passion lives again in their marriage. But then by virtue of the absurd, Others are endowed with some other vocation. They marry Regine, and passion lives again in their marriage, but then, quote, by virtue of the absurd, end of quote, period. And they are day by day astounded to find that they are happy. Such things are too elementary and too complete for words to interpose their dilatoriness between the question which they raise and the answer returned in our living experience. The other theme for reflection is perhaps not entirely unconnected with this. It may even be regarded as a particular aspect of the transition back to passion that Kierkegaard describes. At the summit of the spiritual ascent, which St. John of the Cross narrates in the most ardently passionate language, he knows that the soul attains to a state in which it is perfectly in the presence of the loving object of love. He calls this mystic marriage. The soul then treats its love with a kind of semi-divine indifference. It has got beyond doubt and beyond the point at which separateness seems to be like a rending. It wishes for nothing that its love does not wish for. It is at one with this love in duality, and the duality is now simply a dialogue of grace and obedience, and the desire for the highest passion is thereupon being gratified in the very act of obeying, so that the soul is no longer being cauterized and branded. There is not even any awareness of love, only the happy moderation of acting. Thus, on the analogy of faith, passion, born of a fatal desire for a mystical union, may be regarded as open to being surpassed and fulfilled only thanks to the meeting with some other, and the admission of this other's alien life and ever-distinct person, which, although distinct, holds the promise of unending alliance and begins a real dialogue. Then, dread having been banished by response and nostalgia by presence, they both cease to summon the happiness it is expected to feel and savor, cease to suffer and accept our daylight. It is then that marriage is possible. We are two in contentment. A last time, however, I shall side with moderation. Married couples are not saints, and sin is not some error which we may renounce one of these days in order to adopt a more accurate truth. We are unendingly and incessantly in the thick of the struggle between nature and grace, unendingly and incessantly unhappy and then happy. But the horizon has not remained the same. A fidelity maintained in the name of what does not change as we change will gradually disclose some of its mystery. Beyond tragedy, another happiness waits, a happiness resembling the old but no longer belonging to the form of the world. For this new happiness transforms the world. And this book was originally written from the 21st of February to the 21st of June, 1938, and revised in 1954.